Now, Republicans continue to say the quiet part out loud as progressives and Democrats continue to try to call for making voting easier during the pandemic. So, the reason, of course, Democrats are asking for that is that if you're asking people to wait in long lines to vote during the middle of a pandemic in which COVID-19, of course, spreads incredibly easily, right? And stays on surfaces and in the air for hours. Well, I mean, you would think that that would be very dangerous asking people to stand in those conditions in order to vote. So the obvious answer, of course, would be to come up with other ways for people to actually be able to vote. Like, for example, vote by mail, which doesn't really involve human contact, right? Republicans, however, they're not thrilled with this idea because, well, as they just admitted, it would put them at a disadvantage. So the Atlanta Journal Constitution is reporting that Georgia State House Speaker David Ralston became the latest Republican official to warn about the perils that vote by mail initiatives would have on his party. Quote, this will be extremely devastating to Republicans and conservatives in Georgia. Every registered voter is going to get one of these. Well, that will certainly drive up turnout. Now, get the irony, right? He's saying that as if it's a bad thing. Like, oh, can you believe it? More voter turnout? Making it easy to vote? Horrible, terrible idea. Ooh. No, I don't want people involved in the democratic process. Yeah. Look, it's bad for Republicans because right now they're a party full of reactionaries that basically do everything they can to give rich people everything. Okay. Now, look, to be fair, Democrats also serve the donors and give lots of money to rich people. We know that. But on a lot of issues, Democrats certainly aren't as monstrous as Republicans. I think we can all at least agree on that, even though I'm a huge critic of the Democratic Party, right? Their policies, not great, right? Democrats, but remember, not all Democrats are created equal, by the way. Some are absolutely fantastic. AOC, Rashida Tlaib, Pramila Jayapal. There are many others, right? Some not fantastic. Doug Jones, Henry Cuellar, Chuck Schumer, of course, Nancy Pelosi, on and on, right? Generally, though, with Republicans, you seem to find that most are monstrous. Terrible, right? So now this guy in Georgia is saying, well, look, the reason that we cannot make voting easier is because if we do, we will never win. We would rather endanger our own voters by telling them to go to the polls, to sometimes wait in line, and spread COVID-19. Now, understand how insidious this is, right? Since older people, and yes, everybody can get it, and it can be deadly for younger people too. It's just less deadly to younger people. And it's more deadly to older people, which make up the Republican base. So understand that they are literally putting their power over your lives, over their lives. All right. So it's money and power over everything else. So understand that the masks are off now, right? All the masks have slipped. They don't care about you. They care about their power and now openly admit that they want to keep people away from the polls. They want to put roadblocks in place because if they don't, that they will lose. They don't believe in democracy. They don't believe in voting. And so they're all saying the same thing. Remember, this guy is just one of the Republicans that are saying things like this. You also have the president of the United States saying, yeah, ooh, voting? No, don't like it. We want less of it. Take a look.
I will tell you this. If you look at before and after, the things they had in there were crazy. They had things, levels of voting that if you ever agreed to it, you'd never have a Republican elected in this country again. They had things in there about, election days and what you do and all sorts of clawbacks. And they had things that were just totally crazy.
Totally crazy. I mean, can you believe it? Voting days, more voting days, things like that. crazy. Oh, vote by mail, crazy stuff. I mean, a Republican would never get elected if we actually made it easier to vote. That's what he's saying. They're continuing to enact the plan put forward by the father of the modern, godfather of the modern conservative movement. And it would be Paul Weyrich. Now, I always go back to this when we were talking about voting and voting rights because it is so, I mean, it's the most obvious example. It's the original, the OG father of voter suppression, right? Where he said, Guru syndrome, right? It's the famous Guru syndrome speech. I don't want good government, right? I don't want good government, and I don't want people voting because more people turn out, the less we win, the less we get to dismantle government, privatize it, and help our donors. And that's essentially what it is. If you have less people turning out, we win. More people turn out, we lose. Very, very simple. And Republicans have continued that. Now, of course, they try to couch it in terms of, well, we're trying to verify the integrity of our elections because we think there's lots of voter fraud. In reality, voter fraud is very, very, very rare. Super unlikely. You are more likely to get killed by, I don't know, a vending machine falling on you. You're more likely to get COVID-19 than you are to experience in-person voter fraud. You're much more likely, actually. And so incredibly rare. And multiple studies have pointed that out. And so what you have is a political party that puts everything that they can, or that does everything they can to prevent you from actually going to the polls and exercising your American right to be able to choose your own representation. So I don't think there's any reason that anybody should choose to vote for a party that doesn't believe in that fundamental right. But it's because they've been so successful at blocking people from voting, young people, older, like people that are poor, students, and mainly people who tend to vote for Democrats, and doing that voter suppression, these voter purges and all that stuff. That's why they have the power that they do. Okay. And that means we've got to find a way to overcome that massive disadvantage. And the only way I can think of is to overwhelm them in such numbers that their tricks at voter suppression won't work. Now, that is obviously a lot more difficult. I said the same thing about, hey, look, let's get young people out to vote for Bernie Sanders. And that didn't necessarily work out as well. Yes, there was increased youth turnout, but at the same time, there was also increased voter suppression on college campuses and an increased turnout by older Americans who are generally more conservative. And so I don't know what to do. I don't know if we definitely could have the numbers, but people actually have to be able to turn out and not face that gigantic voter suppression and that's already in place. And so that's the problem, right? All I want to do, unlike Republicans, us progressives, we believe that everyone should have their vote counted and that it should be much more easier to vote than it is now. That it shouldn't take the entire day to go in and vote. That, it should be much, much easier to have your ballot cast and to make sure that your ballot and your vote is counted. Hey guys, hopefully you enjoyed that free video. Now I'm going to have to ask you a favor. Between the demonetization and the YouTube algorithm messing around with view counts, etc., we're having a hard time adjusting to the new YouTube reality, which is where you guys come in. See, we have a patreon.com/TYTNation set up to help us rely on you guys, the viewers, instead of big corporate ads. Look, you know the show. You know how I'm not in favor of big corporations anyway. So help us transition away from relying on the ad model to pay the bills and sign up to be a patron, patreon.com/TYTNation. That goes a long way to help us keep the lights on. And you guys will know that you're supporting independent progressive media.